Pope John Paul I died unexpectedly 33 days after becoming the Pope. He was only 65 years old, was in almost perfect health, and seemed to be in good spirits before his death. There were inconsistencies in the official story from the Vatican. There were also irregularities in the way the body was treated. To this day, many believe Pope John Paul I was murdered. Some think it was Cardinal Sebastiano Baggio. The cardinal was the main person behind the selection process for new bishops at the Vatican and was a notorious Freemason who worked to appoint only liberal bishops. Shortly after John Paul I came into office, he removed Baggio from his congregation on account of his corruption. It could be that Baggio assassinated John Paul as revenge. Some believe the CIA was involved. Others believe it may have been the Italian mafia in connection with high-level church officials. The theory states there was major fraud going on at the Vatican Bank, and John Paul was going to expose it. To stop the scandal, Vatican officials worked with the mafia in order to keep the Pope quiet for good. The secret society of the Illuminati may just be working out of the Vatican. A woman known only as Sfali recently came forward and claimed that she was involved in pagan rituals within the Vatican itself. Sfali said that she used to be a member of the Illuminati and saw with her own eyes how the secret organization is intertwined with the church. She says they perform obscure and unpleasant rituals, secret initiation ceremonies, and so much more. She never did reveal the exact details of the kind of satanic activities they take part in. She also was not able to reveal any names of those involved. Either she was making it all up, or she's too scared for her own life to say much more. A prophecy was published by Arnold Wyan, a Benedictine monk. It wasn't Arnold who had the prophecy, but Saint Malachy, an Irish archbishop from the 12th century. Malachy experienced a vision of the future apocalypse. He was on a trip to Rome in 1139, and he wrote down a series of 112 phrases, each one more cryptic than the last. Each phrase described a future pope, with the final pope ruling prior to the end of the world. Ever since, people have been connecting the names of new popes to one of the phrases found in the prophecy. John Paul II was Pope number 110, based on the phrase, "from the labor of the sun," because he happened to be born on a solar eclipse. Pope number 111 was Benedict XVI, matched to the phrase, "glory of the olive." And then there is the last pope in the prophecy, number 112. That would be Pope Francis, the current pope. If the prophecy is to be believed, we are now living in the end of days. Malachy's prophecy states that after the 112th pope, the city of 7 hills, meaning Rome, will be destroyed. After that, the dreadful judge will evaluate his people, and the world will be ravaged by the apocalypse. According to some, the recently restored catacombs of Priscilla in Rome have provided undeniable proof of an early sect of female priests at the beginning days of Christianity. For 5 long years, restoration work was done in the catacombs, with workers hurrying to get them reopened to the public. The catacombs were initially built starting in the 2nd century AD, and they go on for several miles underneath Rome. Not only do the catacombs hold ancient corpses, but they are also decorated in beautiful frescoes. One of the rooms in the catacombs holds a fresco titled Cubiculum of the Veiled Woman. It depicts a scene of a woman with her arms outstretched, just like what you might see with a priest while saying Mass. She's also seen wearing the vestments of a traditional Christian priest. In another room, known as the Greek Chapel, there is yet another fresco showing a group of women sitting around a table, looking like they're celebrating Mass. Some experts have argued that these ancient frescoes prove that roughly 2,000 years ago, there were female priests. However, somewhere along the lines, the Vatican erased all evidence of that. The Church chooses to uphold the idea that women cannot become priests because Jesus only had male apostles, even though there's speculation that Mary Magdalene had been one of his apostles too. 15-year-old Emanuela Orlandi vanished in Vatican City. She had just finished up a music lesson and was on her way home when she seemingly vanished into thin air. In 2019, almost 30 years after Emanuela went missing, authorities received an anonymous tip. The family was sent a mysterious image of a sculpture in the tomb of Princess Sophie von Hohenlohe. Included with the picture were simple instructions that said to look where the angel is pointing. This led investigators and Emanuela's family to the Vatican's Teutonic Cemetery, at which point they discovered thousands of mysterious bones. These bones have nothing to do with the disappearance of the young girl, but they are a disturbing secret that's yet to be solved. The Teutonic Cemetery is located near the majestic St. Peter's Basilica, one of the most important basilicas in the world. It was originally reserved as a burial plot for Germanic Catholics, and this is where the investigators found 2 chambers filled with hundreds of bones, enough to represent several dozen people. According to what Emanuela's brother told CNN, the Vatican does not want this information released to the public. He says there should be no recent bones buried anywhere in the Vatican, and yet underneath the floor are thousands of bones that could be anywhere from 500 to 5 years old. Unfortunately, after this immense collection of human remains was discovered, the story lost traction and vanished. It's been 3 years and we still have no clue who all those mysterious bones belonged to. Some of the best works of art in the world can be found at the Vatican museums. They have items from ancient Egypt, a pavilion full of chariots, and a significant number of artifacts taken from indigenous people around the globe. When Catholic missionaries started exploring new territories in the early 20th century, they discovered heaps of treasure and brought it all back to the Vatican. The valuables were either put on display or stashed securely in some unknown location. The Anima Mundi Ethnological Museum is where a lot of these indigenous artifacts can be found today. It's located conveniently by the Vatican's food court and is home to tens of thousands of items. Everything from primitive masks, animal skins, feathered headdresses, and intricately carved tusks are stashed here. According to the Vatican, they were gifts to Pope Pius XI. He wanted to honor the success of Catholic missionaries who converted indigenous people to the Church. In other words, the Pope wanted to celebrate the cultural destruction and forced religious reformation of natives everywhere from Canada to Australia. Keep in mind, this was the same Pope who had a personal relationship with Adolf Hitler during World War II. Pope Pius XI believed Hitler could win the war and that the Vatican might become a puppet organization of the Third Reich. A teenager named Laurentius Lauricatus accidentally killed a man in Italy. He was so distraught about the murder that he fled to a cave in the wilderness and lived there for 34 years in solitude. Every day he whipped himself as a form of punishment for his sin. This bizarre medieval story was found written on a piece of parchment that was found stashed in the Vatican's secret archives. The parchment is about 16 feet, 5 meters long, and was put together by villagers who lived near Laurentius's cave. After his death, they petitioned the church for his sainthood. The villagers believed even though he was a murderer, he was so remorseful for his sin that he deserved to go down in history as a saint. The parchment detailing the story is covered in strange purple spots. After analyzing the parchment, they learned that it was made from goat skin and that the weird purple splotches were caused by salt brine. The goat skin was preserved in salt brine, then stretched, shaved, scraped, and sold. The parchment wouldn't have been salty anymore, but there were still bits of salty collagen on the material that quickly became home to bacterial colonies. Over time, moisture and changing temperatures caused the bacteria to turn into purple spots on the manuscript. The Christ myth theory states that Jesus Christ was nothing but a myth. Earl Doherty, a Canadian author and historian, was one of the biggest believers in the theory. He claimed Jesus never existed, and if he did, he had almost nothing to do with the founding of Christianity. It's a myth that's been perpetrated in modern times, and many believe that the Vatican has proof of it. One of the biggest issues with the theory comes down to the Gospels. Contemporary scholars believe the Gospels can be considered ancient biographies, meaning they tell real stories involving real people. On the other hand, there are a lot of other scholars who believe the Gospels cannot be considered historical narratives. These were stories written by people thousands of years ago who manufactured a virgin-born hero to be their Messiah. When you look at the foundation of the Bible, it reads like any other fictional story. The hero comes by a miraculous conception. He goes on to fight the forces of evil, dies at the climax, then is resurrected after death to be victorious. In the end, there's no way anyone can say for certain if Jesus Christ was a real person. That is, nobody except the Vatican. The Vatican removed 14 books from the Bible, and gave no explanation for their reasoning. When the Bible was originally published in English in 1611, it contained 80 books, but the Bible in circulation today only has 66. The books that were removed by the Vatican are now called the Apocrypha, or the hidden books of the Bible. They were included in the Old Testament and consist of famous works such as the History of Susanna, the Prayer for Manasseh, the books of Maccabees, and the Wisdom of Solomon. Yet in 1684, a group at the Vatican decided these books didn't fit in with their system of beliefs, and they were cut. According to religious scholars, the 14 books were removed from the Bible because they were either of unknown authorship or had a doubtful origin. The books were viewed more as fiction than fact, and so they were cut from the Bible entirely. Interestingly, there's a whole different group of books that are even beyond the Apocrypha. These highly controversial texts include everything from the Testament of Judah to the Book of Adam and Eve. And if you ask the Vatican, none of them are legitimate.